Hello, my name is Elijah Davis, and today we're going to take a quick look at building a connector SDK with AI assistance. Specifically, we're going to use VS Code and Claude. We're going to start at the Fivetran documentation in Connector SDK under Connector SDK Examples. Here we will find a link that goes out to how to use AI to help you code a connector SDK. Following this, we have our AI README and our public Git repo with system instructions. So this is a agents.md file, and this system instruction is going to help us configure VS Code with all the context necessary for the models, Claude in this example, 3.7, Sonnet. We are going to provide it all of that context and request that it build us a connector SDK solution for a public API. Now, inside this system instruction, we have things such as, but not limited to, the core identity and purpose, a response framework, technical requirements, validation, response structure, generation rules for the files it's going to create, because it is going to create the connector.py, requirements.txt, and configuration.json necessary to replicate data from the source of our choosing. Now, we need to configure VS Code. So we're going to copy this file, hop over to VS Code, going to go onto the gear icon with Copilot. So to get there, click the tab here, you have your Copilot, click the gear, go to instructions, new instruction file. We'll just call it agents.md and add our file. And there we go. Now we can use this as context in prompts. Another thing that we can do while we're setting up instructions is we can add a template connector. So I got that from the public repo. So I go to our template example connector and I grab the connector.py and I added that as context as an instruction file. So now I'm going to use that in a prompt to have it build me a connector. Naturally, I need a data source. So for this example, we're going to do the OpenFDA and the drug API endpoints, and we're going to grab data from all of them. And so there's going to be quite a bit of context that we want to add. So we're going to, in VS Code, create a project folder and a single file in it. We're going to call this file notes.txt. And in it, we're going to include pertinent information from our data source. So I found some info on authentication. I grabbed that. I grabbed some info just about the general usage of the API. And then I grabbed all of the example queries. So if we jump back over to VS Code, we can open up my notes.txt. We can see we got authentication, requests, and then the example queries being documented here. So at this point, we have all the context, the system instructions. Now we can build a prompt. So jumping over to the right-hand side with my Copilot, I have broken the prompt into 3 sections. Section 1 is our data source and our specific request of just build the connector SDK. We include all the endpoints that we want it to do, and we specifically call out that we have pertinent data about this API in our context file, which we're calling notes.txt. Our second section is we're being very specific with what we want it to do with this code that it generates. So on review of the documentation for this data source, we notice that you don't always require, or it does not always require an API key. So we want it to default without one. But we want it to not burn out our API calls. So we're going to have it exit gracefully after the first 10 requests and rows are upserted. So in that way, we can just test our connection to this data source in a very controlled manner and make it dynamic using configuration.json. So we're going to have it be dynamic so that our users can control how many runs, what the lookback window is, and whether or not they want to use an API key to get additional requests. We know from the connector SDK that all configuration values must be strings, and we really only want it to define the primary key for every table. This is following Fivetran best practice, as Fivetran will infer the rest. We also are just going to ask the model and let it know, like you can test the queries before you write the solution so it can get familiar with the data source. We have all that query documentation linked inside our notes. The last section is where we're adding our context and instruction files. So here we're just being very specific with the last 3 things we want it to do. When it takes into consideration 1 and 2, we want it to follow the best practices that we outlined in our instruction file, which again is from the Fivetran Git repo and it is the agent's MD. So that's our one-to-one there. And then we're going to have it refer to a template that is seen in our other instruction file, which is the connector.py from our public repo. And lastly, we're going to ask that it builds this solution in the project folder that we have defined. So now if we jump over here, we can see our project folder is just FDA drug VS Code Claude. It has notes.txt, which we have on screen for our context, and then our instruction files on the back end. So at this point, we're ready to submit the prompt and start coding with Claude. And I'm going to submit the prompt. You'll notice here on the bottom, I have agent enabled and 3.7 Sonnet for this test. And now it's already done its research. It's going to start building a connector. It's identified that it needs to build 3 files. Here's our config.json. And it looks like I already did the requirements. And it's working on connector.py. And there we have it. It created the connector itself now. And now it's going to create a README. Here's our README. Beautiful. Now it's going to summarize. Next, we're going to ask it to debug this code that it wrote. Make sure it works. Okay, we are going to keep all of those changes. No edits made. We're going to say we want to be on connector.py. Say, great. Test the solution using Fivetran debug. All right, now we're going to ask it to run the command. Let's actually make sure it worked. And it's going to CD into our project folder, FDA drug VS Code Claude, and run our command. Here we have it on the bottom terminal. If we condense that, first sync failed. And it's getting a 404 because of the date range. And now it's going to make a change and test again. Perfect. Now it's made the changes and it wants to test again. We're going to let it go. And there we go. We got 10 records replicated. And now we're testing incremental. And there we go. And it's now addressing the warnings that were identified, all with no intervention. So this created a warehouse.db file. And we want to see the data that it replicated, right? So we're going to say, great, show me the data from warehouse DB using DuckDB syntax. Okay, now it's going to check. And here we go. So there's our initial data set, first 5 rows. And here are the drug events. And now it's joining everything together. And drug labels does not exist because that endpoint was not replicated. It only did drug events. So, and here are our 20 rows. Now it's checking key fields. All this agentically being done through the data that it replicated from a pipeline it created that it is now trying to get us data insights. So we're just going to let it keep teaching us, what is this data? What can this data be used for? And now a couple metadata. And at this point, we can cancel. And now we need it to replicate data from all the endpoints. So we're going to jump back over to connector.py, just say, this is working great. We need to test the first 10. We need to test all the endpoints so we can review data in each table. So now we're just going to have it refine the logic so that we're able to see data from all of the endpoints that we requested so we can get true data validation and then deploy to Fivetran. Okay, now it's trying to do some inference to see what else it has. Okay, there we go. Now it's determined that it only has drug events. Perfect. Now it's going to go back into config and connector.py and update it. So it's updating our records. And now it's going to go per endpoint. Beautiful. Keep those changes and let it test. Perfect. So now it's gone through, it's made a few updates, and now it is iterating forward to resolve the issues it is finding in connector.py. Perfect. So we're 4 for 6 on our endpoints, and it is working on fixing the issues it's identified. Okay, so now we got one last one that's having an issue. Now we have our replicated data, and it's going to check all the records in each table. And we're going to cancel here, and it said it had an issue with one of the endpoints, which was drug shortages. So let's go help it out. Let's grab some information from the drug shortages. And we'll grab an example query. And we're literally just going to grab all this information here. And we're going to say, to fix drug shortages, can you infer from blank? Okay, so we just gave it a bunch of context we grabbed from the web and asked it to fix the drug shortages so we can get 6 for 6 and get all of the data replicated. Now it's going through and it's working through to see what we can get. Perfect, this is what I wanted. Now it's actually going to test before. This is something I asked in the original prompt and it got here eventually. But now it's checking, all right, how do we even get data? And now it's going to go fix the code for those endpoints. All in all, it can take some time, but as long as you are working with AI, you can typically get to functional code. So now it's going to go through, make these changes that it's learned about. Beautiful. There we go. Now, let's see if we can review the data from all of the tables now. And the last thing we'll have to do is deploy to Fivetran. Perfect. So now that we have all of our endpoints replicating data successfully, we're going to ask it to show the data in every table that we replicated. Row count and keys, please. So now let's review the data that it replicated. Here we go. There's all of our data, or our tables. Checking row counts. There we go. We got some objects in every table. Primary keys and some samples. Boom. Here's our drug events, ordered by safety ID. Here are the drug labels. How about drug NDCs? Ooh, did not like that. So let's see if it'll fix. It's a good plan to use columns that exist in the table. And on the next one, we have drug enforcement. So we're just rocking through. We got NDC, enforcement. Let's check out FDA and just general drugs and shortages, the one that it was struggling with. And here we go. All the shortage information as well. Here's all the available objects. And now it wants to keep going and showing us more and more on how is it nested, etc. So at which point we're good. So we're going to say, this looks good. Let's deploy to Fivetran using Fivetran deploy. All right, now it's checking our files. Now it's checking to make sure everything is good to deploy to Fivetran based on the best practices. We gave it in the system instructions. And here's our command to deploy. So you can see here, it's now asking me for the destination name. So I can jump over to Fivetran, go to my dashboard, and I will deploy to CSG auto test. And I'll jump back and I enter that in the terminal and hit enter. It now wants a name, so we're going to do FDA drug video. API key, I set this earlier as an environment variable, so it's defaulting. It's cool. Configuration, yes, I need it. And the default location is your project folder. So I'm going to say yes. And my default is in the project, so I do not need to change it here. And I will hit enter. Now, it is going to deploy the code to Fivetran. And I want it to update to the latest stable. Boom, there we have it. If I command click here and open, I now have my FDA drug video connector, and I'm in a sync. So all in all, we went from a highly contextually driven prompt to functioning code for a connector SDK to replicate data from 6 endpoints into a single schema in our Snowflake instance. We did so by using public information from the Fivetran Git repo and documentation. And we also did this with public APIs and documentation there with no API key necessary. So all in all, when you use a highly contextually driven prompt with assistant instructions, you can typically find success in short order for a data pipeline. And as seen today, you can debug and iterate forward with that AI to ensure the connection works as expected and ultimately gets deployed to your Fivetran instance. I hope you found this session insightful. If you have any questions or concerns, please reach out. I'm on the services team and here to help.